of the lovely tutorial on terrain. So I wanted to really quick take everybody on the team through my process, and that will allow also the Blender users to adapt the pipeline for their own use. So to start, here I am in ZBrush, and I have brought in my blackout from the graybox. And it's important to note that I don't take the graybox straight up. I make sure that it's all quads and triangles and that it's fairly airtight. I'll also, if there's an area that needs to sync up with like a doorway, or for example, right here is where an additional asset of like a dwarf village is. So this is basically the cleaned up gray box for the fissure. And it's all basically one piece. But the first thing I do to start out is I take and break it up into polygroups. And I usually group it by normals. So let's try 45 and see, this gives me a pretty good result. I might take, for example, and add this little part to this, group this, and so anyway, you can basically, change the angle. Maybe we'll try 90. See what happens. That's too much. Anyway, so you get the idea. You both manually and using the normal angle break it up into places that would be good for like having edge loops and like things that you're going to want to snap. For interior, I will usually add a creased edge around a doorway, so that way I can mask that doorway. And these will help basically breaking things up, and when we start separating out the areas, it will kind of keep the groups consistent. Okay, so we have our block out, and this is what I ended up with for my final polygroups. You can see like the top of this is one and this is another. And so I typically separate ceiling, walls, and floor. I found that works pretty well. And the first thing we want to do with this is make sure that it's retopologized. So we duplicate this, the block out, once we've got the polygroups proper. And then we go to ZRemesher. And an important thing to keep in mind is say keep groups. And I also often do keep creases. That's a thing that will help with the door. And so bring down smooth groups because you want these hard edges to stay the same. But ideally, yeah, this might be a little low. So right now this is set to 5. So let's bump it up to do about 20K. Okay, that should give us a fair amount of mesh to deform. So yeah, so now you have basically a mesh with fairly even quads that can be displaced. So just go through here. So this is what we came up with in the final grouping. So now you have that, you can sculpt on it. So duplicate it once more, and I turn off my groups here. But the brushes I tend to like to use are just like clay buildup, stuff like that. You can just take this blocky model and start smoothing it. And the best way I've found to do that is using the masking, see, you can do by border, groups, and crease. And so if I mask by feature, this means it will protect the doorways and it will protect all that stuff. And the other thing you can do is store a morph target. So right now, we will duplicate this just to bring you through the whole process. So now you have your groups broken up. You can use the morph target and say store morph target, and that will basically remember the shape right as it is now. And masking, let's mask out all the border edges. For example, the doorways, wherever it's supposed to, like, for example, along this edge, it snaps vertex to the town asset. So we don't want that to change at all. But what we can do to start softening it out, run the polish a few times. I like to keep it masked, but you don't necessarily have to mask it. You can just start sculpting on it without any mask. So you just start filling in these edges, smoothing it, bringing up the topology here, making sure it looks very organic. You can start, making it bumpy, hills and valleys, just really bring in these rock forms. But the nice thing about this is when, say, you sculpted a bunch of stuff and you even put some near the door and everything, but you're like, oh, this doorway's got to snap. So you just go and mask all those hard edges and then go to your morph target and bring it all the way up. And that way we'll make sure all those snappable edges stay consistent. So you keep sculpting on it and just, get it so you like your forms. I find I don't even really subdivide much. I just use whatever polygon density is gonna end up in the final version. So it's keeping going like here. And you can use whatever brushes you want, like if you have a nice hard polish or rock brush, or do whatever makes a good cave. So this is about where I was happy with it. You can see I sculpted some of the wall forms and soften out the plateau here. If you want to basically take any of the ground and flatten it out more, you can just, mask one of those polygroups out and take the morph target again and flatten that up. So once you got something you're fairly happy with, you can. This is the point at which I usually take it into another program and UV it. But I can also UV. Typically, you don't have as much control over it if you UV in ZBrush. But if you're working in something like Blender, you can adjust your texel density to however big you want it to use your displacement map. So here you've got the version, and one thing I found for a quick UV is, I'll assign a texture. Well, first I have to have UVs on there. I use polygroups, so I can do unwrap, and then it will unwrap by polygroup, and you can see how the UV shells line up with the groups I created. So you will see seams, but the seams will be at these edges. And so once you've got your UVs, and you're pretty satisfied with, you make a duplicate of this. And then here's the really fun part where you do the displacement. So you apply a texture map. So I can use, oh, this one doesn't have UVs. All right, so this is one that I'd taken out into Maya to do UVs on. And you can see it if I put it there, you can see, this is about the density of the height map I'm going to put on it. It's just going to be a tiling texture. So I use something that's not super obvious, or you can put like a temporary rock texture on to kind of give you the impression. But, assign a texture map just to see. And then you want to go to Alpha and import a height map. It is something black and white that will show you, for example, we can get like a desert cliff here. And then we got this assigned. We choose our desert cliff height. Now we can see how this basically will add these rock forms in here. You turn on mode, and obviously the seams, it shows where the displacement, it won't break it apart, but this is where the seams are going to be that you'll have to sculpt out. So yeah, I'm kind of liking where this is going. This looks like about the right amount of displacement. So we're going to, if we like that, we can just duplicate this model and then apply the displacement map. And you can see here's where our seams are. So you're gonna turn off the quick, or turn on the quick thing. And so we'll just have to sculpt some of these out. But you can see it gives you a lot of detail. And turning on our edge loops, it's deformed my base mesh, but it doesn't deform it so much that it really stretches out the polys. And that's why it's important to have that initial really dense mesh. You can also, at the end, go up and do a decimation. Say you decide that 32K faces is like, oh, that's too much for my game. The last thing we're going to want to do is use those morph targets and snap it back to where it was before. So we should still have our poly groups. You can see I've masked these out, what I want to snap, and we go invert, and then there we go. Now all our edges are back vertex perfect, and they should match up with all the other elements. You can see between these two rooms, I ended up having pretty severe transition, but I just have it continue to be masked, and I sculpt over it and soften out that transition. It keeps that doorway the same. So, and this still it should retain the UVs, so you can take it back into Blender or Maya and maybe double the UV size. Usually what I use for height map is slightly bigger than, it's actually quite a bit bigger than what I use for like the tiling base texture and normal and stuff like that. So you're almost getting a different detail in the mesh than you are in the texture. But it can also be used in tandem with a base map that has a height map as well. So you can sculpt the mesh procedurally to fit with your texture. So yeah, that's about it. Like I said, the last step, if you find this is too much, is to just go up to Decimation Master and be like, I want it to be 20K, and just click that. It will break it down for you. But I've actually found that's not even that necessary. And for an entire terrain, having it be like 32K, not terribly shabby. So that is my process for creating terrain shells for Colossal Caves. Thanks for watching, and I hope you get a lot of use out of this video.